So when I course corrected my relationship with food, when I course corrected how I understood food as fuel and approached it as this additive approach and not reductive, and when I understand that I'm working out not to become a certain size, but what this is doing for me and what this was doing for me today and what this is doing for me in the long haul. And that's when my body changed. And it just like became this whole thing. And like, I changed my life.
Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turns multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and I am back this week with another amazing suburban warrior here to share her story with us. Before we get into the podcast, I wanted to just remind you all to check out our free download from Pause to Power Suburban Warrior Roadmap. This is a roadmap for all of those women out there in midlife who may be starting to experience some perimenopausal symptoms. Maybe you don't even know it's perimenopause, or if you're in menopause, it is sort of a roadmap to take you through from A to Z, things that you can do, questions you can ask your doctor. It's basically everything I wish I had about 10 years ago when I was going through all this. It is free to you in a download at suburbanwarriorpodcast.com. So check that out. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for our Pause Like a Warrior weekly newsletter. This is basically all of the hot topics from the podcast dropped right into your inbox weekly. So be sure to get that as well. And I just wanted to also say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of the Suburban Warrior community where we are redefining midlife wellness with grit and grace. And I am thrilled to have you here. And, along those lines of, redefining midlife wellness, it brings me to the topic that we're going to talk about today with my guest is brain health is one really important topic that a lot of people are talking about these days when it comes to midlife wellness and how important it is and why is it important and what can we do to really protect our brains in our 30s, 40s, 50s so that later in age we are not rolling into Alzheimer's or dementia. There's things that we can do now. So that brings me to my amazing guest today. Rachel Daugherty is a daughter of a woman with Alzheimer's and intimately understands the grief, profound sadness, and deep fear of following the same path. Her mission is showing people they aren't doomed to repeat the fate they've witnessed in their families by teaching evidence-based tools that reduce their risk of developing Alzheimer's. She empowers others to completely reframe their relationship to food, fitness, and their long-term health by viewing all of their actions through the lens of brain health. Rachel helps people recognize and embrace their power to shape their future selves, which also leaves them feeling strong, energized, and capable in the present. And she wants to show us how. So welcome to the podcast, Rachel.
Thank you. It's lovely being here.
I'm so excited to have you here because, like I said in the introduction, I think along with all of the things like hot flashes and joint pain and bone health and cardiovascular health and weight gain and the list goes on and on. There's so many symptoms that we are experiencing in midlife as women that we are now understanding is part of this perimenopausal, menopausal, hormonal fluctuation journey that we're going through. And a big topic of that is brain health. And I know it's something that comes up with my clients. It's something that comes up with my friends. It's something that comes up with all over my social media. And, people are talking about brain health and what can we do to sort of preserve it. But I'm not sure if we're really understanding why we're doing what we're doing, or what are the actual changes that we can make now to sort of help us prevent that in the long term. So first, tell us a little bit about you and your journey, because I know it's really deeply personal for you.
Absolutely. About 7 years ago, my mom started having memory problems. I'll make a very long story short about that journey.
No, it doesn't have to be too short. We're here, we're listening.
And she didn't have a long-term care plan. My brother and I did the best we could to piece together caretaking, and we moved her up here to where I live in Asheville. And luckily she got a house just a 4-minute walk away from me and my brother and I. My brother lived with her, and we did our best to piece together caretaking as best we could. And it was so devastating and gut-wrenching and just emotionally, I like the phrase I use is emotionally violent. Like it was just so much. And, at the time, my kids were pretty little at the time. They were 3 and 7 when she moved up here. And so I was juggling, classic sandwich generation, caretaking for my mom, having younger kids, stress of life, and approaching 40, and everything's falling apart, and doing the best I can to hold it all up, and spending years of my life pouring out, and trying my best to take care of myself. And it was so hard, because my mom also had mental health issues and bipolarism. And so it was like Alzheimer's on top of that was just it was a lot. And so, in the trauma of taking care of her, I, was doing my best. And I have this story of the day that changed my life, that I was sitting on the porch with her, and we're watching my kids play. We're trying to do our best and just trying to hold all the emotion of going through this. And it occurred to me that what if my kids have to experience the actual nightmare of what I'm currently experiencing with my mom, except with me?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like one of those moments in a movie where it's just everything shifted. Everything shifted.
In one thought.
In one thought of what can I do? And so I spent years delving into the research of okay, well, it turns out Alzheimer's can be, I think one of the first things I learned is Alzheimer's is in your brain up to 20 years before symptoms appear. And so erroneously, I was and I feel almost embarrassed to admit this, but thinking it's some kind of wonky gene that starts damage 20 years beforehand. No, we are doing the damage to our brain, and it is a cumulative effect of years and years, decades of damage that ends up with Alzheimer's. So not completely. There's a genetic component, of course, but there's so much we can do. There's so much that damages our brain. And so there's so much that we can do, the lifestyle components. And so I just started learning all about, what is, metabolic health has a lot to do with it. Well, what does that mean? Well, what affects metabolic health? I'm okay, well, that's blood sugar. Well, you ever heard the terms blood sugar and glucose? I'm I don't know, in one ear, out the other. I'm I don't know. Yeah. Not really understanding the complex physiological mechanisms at play here, right? And so I spent years trapped, the majority of my adult life, trapped in diet culture and, trying to, that same old story. And it wasn't until I flipped the script of getting away from trying to make my body a certain way that I wanted it to be, and fighting my body and trying to restrict and all of that, that all of that went out the window when I focused on what are the physiological mechanisms at play and how do I optimize my body for my brain? It became, I'm oh, that's nothing. And it was when I started focusing on what felt and understanding what's happening in my body, why these actions are so important. And then also connecting for the first time in my life. This is why I speak so much to self-connection and everything, because it's such a component of deep change when you move away from following the rules or doing the thing to hope to get the results to, when I do this, I actually feel really good. And then that sparks its own positive internal motivation. It's like, it's not even motivation anymore. It's a self-propelling positive machine now. And so when I course corrected my relationship with food, when I course corrected how I understood food as fuel and approached it as this additive approach and not reductive, and when I understand that I'm working out not to become a certain size, but what this is doing for me and what this was doing for me today and what this is doing for me in the long haul. And that's when my body changed. And it just like became this whole thing. I changed my life. And so I spent years thinking like, how do I share this? Because in my mind, I'm like, no one cares about brain health. Like in my mind.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I would say that's probably right as of like maybe 4 to 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in this menopausal conversation and the conversation that's just about metabolic health in general, more and more people are concerned about their brains. But I think just going back to what you said about being told it's genetic, like I think so many diseases we are told. I mean, listen, in the healthcare field, in pharma, like everybody's looking at the genes and like, okay, well, if your, parents had it or your grandparents had it, okay, yes, you might be predisposed or a little bit more susceptible to, but that doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to get it or that you may not get it if you don't have the gene. Like, so I think that that's a fair point, but I think that in general, people believe that because I think that's kind of what the healthcare system tells us. And they even tell us in a very inadvertent way, just in the way that they take health histories, right? Yeah. Give us, what are all the diseases your grandparents had, your parents had? And then they focus on those. But like, there's a lot of other things that we could be dealing with or going through that aren't related to what our parents or our grandparents had, and vice versa. So genetics are sort of just one little thing on the menu, right? Like, I mean, and so I think that's one really good point. And then another thing that you said is, I remember when I first read, again, years ago, when I was just doing research, talking about or looking into more metabolic health, and I'm trying to understand that for myself and for my clients. I first read that, Alzheimer is quote unquote like a type 3, like it should be called type 3 diabetes. And when I read that, I was literally floored. Like, wait, what? So this could be something that is related to our metabolic health and possibly our blood sugar and how we are regulating our blood sugar and what our lifestyle, because I don't think anyone was ever really attributing lifestyle to Alzheimer's in general. No. At least not in my world.
Not in my world.
And all of a sudden, when you put that label on it and you're thinking about metabolic health, we know now that we can really help to alter and shape our own metabolic health with lifestyle and what we do and how we take care of ourselves and that sort of thing, daily habits. So again, I'm hoping that more and more people are understanding that kind of thing, that we do have some control over what's going to happen to us, in our 60s, 70s, 80s. And then the last thing that about brain health in women, I think it's now more and more part of a conversation. Like, never were people, I think, in their 40s and 50s talking about Alzheimer's prevention. Yeah. Like, I'm going to do this because I don't want to be like a relative or a parent or even just, people starting in midlife to start to, have a little brain fog and memory issues. That's scary. And now people are starting to say, wait a second, let me really figure this out.
Exactly.
So you just, you had this experience and you went to another level to really take it on. And like you said, this profound moment of looking at your kids and thinking, I don't want to continue this, circle. So tell us then, you did the research. What were some of the things that you were finding out that you realized, okay, wait, I have some control over this?
The first thing, biggest component, the first thing I learned was the connection to metabolic health. And yes, and it's funny because I had heard this term diabetes type 3 and being like, oh, okay, so it has something to do with blood sugar. I had heard that years ago, but still not connecting that to my own, to lifestyle behavior and still being really far away from that. And so when I dive deeper into, okay, well, what is blood sugar? What is metabolic health? Like, what is this? So then connecting to like, well, what do we need to do? What are the mechanisms at play? How do I understand this? And so it wasn't until I this is why I also try and do my best to educate people on science in a really accessible, fun, kind of approachable way, because I love and appreciate all the doctors and neuroscientists that are speaking to this, but they're also speaking it, I think, unless you're very, very proactive, you're not kind of seeking, or you're not able to hear a lot of this information. I think it's
highly scientific.
It's highly scientific.
There's
right.
a lot of research going on, but it is very scientific.
Exactly. So like, like the win of not being a doctor and not being in that world is that I do my best to make this like super approachable and in words that are just in ways that people can hear it. And so like, okay, let's understand what insulin resistance of the brain actually means. And so I think it's really important that people understand like what's happening in your brain. Like you need to conceptualize and truly grasp the cause and effect of what's happening. And so when I understood blood sugar, I'm like, okay, well, what affects blood sugar? It's not just food. It's a two-sided situation. It's all the glucose coming in, and it's also giving your body the tools, muscle, to handle it. So it's like minimizing the input and optimizing the equipment. I have this analogy of a factory.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to give ourselves the good quality raw materials that aren't over flooding the system, and we have to take care of our equipment. And so that was the first thing I learned. And so like it was approaching fitness again from this place of like, oh, this is what I need to build this muscle to give my body the tools. This has nothing to do with my physique. And that's a cherry on top, great. But it's connecting to the deeper why and connecting to the understanding of the power of it is incredibly, it's game changing.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the why and deeper understanding. But first I have a question. I'm just curious, when your mom was first diagnosed, did the doctors or the healthcare system, did they talk about it being like a metabolic disorder and any ways to help reverse it in any way?
Nope. Nothing.
Yeah.
I think there's more of a conversation around that now, and people are trying to see what they can do to mitigate or at least not make symptoms progress. They can slow progression. Right. And there's Heather Sanderson has a book called Reversing Alzheimer's. There's lots of protocols, and I shy away from talking about that. I think I'll leave that to the experts more, but no, there was no.
No, I was just I was more curious in the healthcare system, like if they kind of explained it at all.
Nothing.
Like that.
No one is having that conversation.
Sort of like, this is your diagnosis.
This is your diagnosis. Like, here's some
no lifestyle changes, no diet changes.
Nothing. And I'm like, it's devastating because my mom, long story, but she passed away pretty rapidly. And so now I have a lot more energy and time to focus on this. And like, if I had known this information, there's so much I could have done. There's so much, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because there's so much I could have done to either, slow progression or help her, or there's a lot, and no one was talking about that. Maybe they are now, but not even just 4 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about the deeper why about like when you're doing these things like working out, changing your lifestyle, but I do want to touch on like, what are those sort of initial lifestyle changes that you saw or felt that you needed to make, right? Because, it was changing your perspective on why you're doing things, but also possibly understanding that maybe your fitness routine or certain things that you needed to change. What were sort of some of those things that you were doing that not only mentally you had to change your perspective on them, but what were you doing that made you feel better? I didn't overhaul my life. It was a process because it also took a long time to learn. And the more I learned, the more I adopted. So that's also the way I teach, right? I teach like we're not overhauling our life. And so the thing I say is like, you don't need to overhaul your life. Pick one meal
which I always like breakfast. Breakfast is the meal to start with. That's the one thing I notice immediately, how different it feels to start the day fueled well, and what that sets the tone for your blood sugar the rest of the day. And then like that, I feel like that is a really, really good starting place that gives you the win of noticing how much better it feels, and that it's not that you lack willpower. It's not that you're like not trying. It's like you're working against your physiology. Like I've been working against my body. I've been battling and working against my body my whole life. And it wasn't until I understood what my body needed to thrive that my body and I started working in partnership. And then it was just so much easier. So much easier.
So meaning like before you were having a breakfast,
I would fast. I would have
just,
coffee, and then I would try to hold off as long as I could, and then and then like maybe have lunch, and then and then probably eat too much for dinner, and then feel like and then I ate, and then wouldn't feel good about myself because I would probably binge on cooking, not binge, but have too many cookies because hunger will win.
I know what you mean because I've been there.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been there. I've done that.
Exactly.
Yes,
and because hunger will always win, and then it turns out you are much less insulin sensitive at night. And so that's going to be actually more harmful for you than if you front load the food. And, it's just not having any understanding of how in general, how most people function the best. And that's front loading your fuel, using fuel when you need it during the day and not
exactly. Because, and again, this is a lot of women in midlife are told that they should be intermittent fasting. And that includes basically most of the time for women, it's skipping breakfast because it's eating dinner and then not eating again, 16-8, not eating again until maybe 11, 12 o'clock. So which is really a lunch. And I did that for years in my perimenopausal phase and menopausal phase. And I recently probably over the last year, have stopped doing that because I have felt like I needed to honor my body by fueling it in the morning. And I do feel much better, especially because I'm working out in the morning.
Yeah.
So, working out fasted on black coffee. And then I was crashing at 2, 3 o'clock in the middle of the day and wondering why. And it's like, well, because I wasn't really setting myself up. And again, to your point, everything is cyclical. Like our bodies change and we have to honor where we are in the moments. And I think there was a phase in perimenopause for me that it probably did work to intermittent fast. But I needed to stop. Like that got to a point where it wasn't working for me. So I think, again, listening to that why and that your voice, your body sort of telling you what it needs at the time, just because you were doing something before doesn't mean you have to do it forever.
Exactly. And I think it's so important. It's hard, at least for me, I won't speak, but I think I want to say in general, but it was for me to hear about intermittent fasting and okay, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to power through and trying, and you have to disconnect from your body in order to follow the rules of the thing. Right. Yeah. And so I think I hear a lot more conversation around much more connection to paying attention to how we feel and not just shutting it down and trying to move forward, shut it down and do the thing. And it's getting away from that and getting much more in tune and listening to ourselves. And it took a long time for me to trust that it's okay to trust myself. So that's a huge component of it is self-connection and self-trust and all these things, because I think most women have a tendency, I am still a huge fan of intermittent fasting,
right?
Just shifted, right? So front load, eat in the morning, cut yourself off around, 6 or so at night.
Yeah.
Because that's working with the cadence of your body. And also it's harder to teach because it's nuanced, but the cyclical factor, right? So people are like, oh, I've been doing keto for years. And your body's not meant to be in ketosis for years. We're not meant to do, especially women, we're not meant to do the same thing all the time. It's intermittent fasting. Well, maybe less so in the summer because there's more daylight and we're doing more. And then maybe, in the winter when we have less day, it's a whole thing. So it's paying attention to the cyclical nature of how really life works. We work in seasons.
How life works, how our human
bodies exactly.
Yeah, we're set up to work, right? When you just think back to how we were created and how we used to live hundreds of years ago, and it just by the circadian rhythms of the sun and the moon, and our cells are still in tune to that.
Yes.
But and then the issue is listen, at the end of the day, we all want to feel good, we all want to be healthy, but there's so many rules.
Exactly.
Like I said, there's so many rules.
There's so many rules, and I think it's hard. It's so tempting to be like, just tell me what to do, and then I'll do that forever, so I don't have to think, blah blah blah. But it's this practice of like that's actually, we do need to think, we do need to be connected, and we do need to start paying attention to the ebbs and flows and the cyclical nature of all of this. And it's harder because you have to pay more attention and be more connected in that way. But that's how it works. And so there's a temptation of just like, I'll just do this so I can stay in the lines, but that's not how we roll.
Right.
Unfortunately.
So when you were going through this process for yourself personally, how were you connecting? Like, if there's people listening that are thinking to themselves, well, I want to protect my brain health, I want to do better, I want to feel better, I want to be more connected to myself. So where do they start?
Okay, so breakfast I think is always the important thing, and then I think it's really, really important to give yourself some health literacy.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah, I heard that term recently. I'm like, that is the best term I've ever heard. Health literacy.
Health literacy. I love that. That's like my advocate for yourself, right? But you have to have some health literacy in order to be able to advocate
exactly.
for yourself.
You have to have some help. You have to have some understanding in order to not just swallow the rules, right?
Yes,
so like I remember talking about this with my friend and this is years ago, and trying to share things about blood sugar, and then she texted me, she's like, can I eat a banana? I'm like, oh, we have so much to learn.
Oh, no.
And that's like, you don't have to rely. I like educating people and helping people get some health literacy so they don't have to wonder, can I eat a banana? It's like, well, what have I done? Have I moved? Like, have I eaten? What's going on? So that they just know. They're not reliant on this external situation. And so I hate to give like a vague answer. Like,
no, I'm actually laughing to myself because I think that's a really funny story. Can I eat a banana? Because I will just tell you, even personally, in the last like couple years, like there was like times when I've seen like only eat a banana when it's green. It's the healthiest time to eat the banana. Then there's more research that shows eat the banana when it's its ripest. It's, that is when the best time to eat the banana. Then it's like, don't eat bananas. Eat nothing but bananas. I'm like actually cracking up to myself because I'm thinking of just the amount of information I've seen about, can you eat a banana? I mean, it's actually a legit question where people get to a point and you're like, wait, is this healthy for me or not? Yeah. Instead, based on outside information. Instead of just, going for what you feel intuitively is going to be good for you in that moment.
Exactly. And not just so intuitively, absolutely. And on top of the understanding of how it'll affect you. Right?
Right.
So those two things in combination, I think, are super, super empowering. And so my biggest thing is like helping people understand how their blood sugar works and cause and effect of movement, sunlight, stress, sleep, and food all have on it. And so like also connecting to, I'm like, oh, when I, feeling not great about myself, if I had a horrible night's sleep and the next day I eat way too much. And so it's like, oh, well, these are the physiological mechanisms at play. And that's why. So it takes away some of this shame and blame. And when you just understand what's going on, I think there's a degree of responsibility for sure. And there's a degree of like cutting yourself some slack because of what's just going on in your body. So I think it's just really extremely empowering information because you can take that intuition and apply, factual cause and effect around it.
Yeah, right. So in talking about health literacy, then a good place to start is understanding our blood sugar, right? And how it works in our body, how it regulates, where we want it to be. Possibly, asking your physicians for some tests that will help to, look at your blood blood sugar, like,
Fasting
that
glucose,
they won't normally ask for, like, maybe a fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose,
Yes.
right? Like,
and understanding, sorry, I didn't mean to cut, but
No, go ahead,
understanding
please.
what doctors say is normal versus what is optimal. Those are different things.
Okay, so explain that to my listeners then.
So, right, there's a range of what's normal for, like, I don't have like the numbers, right. But like,
No, of course. But I mean just the difference between normal and optimal, because
right. So what we have normalized as like an okay spectrum, because this is where we are as a society. But what is actually optimal is usually, most of the times, a completely different number for how our body thrives. So these are important terms to, like, not just rely again on like what you hear from the doctor and then be like, okay, well, currently that's a normal range. Well, let's look deeper into that. Well, what is normal? Is normal optimal? Not usually, mostly not.
No, exactly. And those ranges are like, the normal is usually a little bit of a larger range, right? To your point, and it's sort of like where most of the population falls, in general. But then the optimal range is usually a tighter range. It's more of, those in like functional medicine or integrative medicine. It's a tighter range to really say, but this is really where we should be to be that are real healthiest, right?
Yes.
So, and that's kind of something that, again, you can go to your primary care physician and you can get these tests done and you can see where you're at. But when you're in the normal range, it's even tighter, and understanding sort of what those ranges are.
Exactly.
And that's kind of a first, first thing that people could do to understand metabolically where they are with their health and their blood sugars.
Yes. And another thing I highly, highly recommend too is, like, as far as giving yourself an understanding of what's going on in your own body, is lab tests for sure. And then a DEXA scan, which is, so it gives you an accurate look at your lean body mass versus fat mass, and also bone density.
Yeah.
And it's much, much more empowering and helpful information, and tells you much more about what's going on in your body than versus weight, right? It's like what your body is composed of. And then also, I think it's just fascinating information, especially if you're starting your health journey, to give you a baseline of like, okay, well, it turns out I'm like, I don't know, 38% body fat. And that's this, like, if I had much more muscle mass, this would help, so it becomes less about size and diet culture, and much more like, well, what is my body composed of serving me? Yeah. So those things are really helpful.
Absolutely. And then we get into, like you said, muscle mass, like talking, like, it is really our largest metabolic organs, if you will, like, and so again, this conversation about protein and muscle and midlife it's being talked about a lot for good reason. I don't think everybody, I think, it's like kind of a joke about the amount of protein women are trying to get in their diets constantly. And again, I think that's hard because, again, it's like the rules. Well, how much protein should I be getting?
Exactly.
And people like weighing and checking off every box. And sometimes, some days you just can't do it, and then you feel terrible about yourself. So I don't think that's really good either. But let's just talk about muscle mass, and, because you are a big proponent of weightlifting, right? And using weights and exercising. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, again, in learning that muscle is your greatest metabolic, not just metabolic, but your greatest ally as far as aging and strength and mobility, but also, and understanding for the first time years ago that, like, oh, muscle has something to do with your metabolic health. Like, I think it's a common phrase, like, muscle burns more calories than fat or whatever. But it's like, it's not about it's not about the calories. It's that it's a glucose sponge, and therefore it's helping your insulin sensitivity. It's helping the whole system. It's giving you are empowered to give your body better equipment. And the better equipment you have, it's like a factory. What does equipment do? It does the work for you. So if you take care of your equipment will do work for you. And so it was like the more, I've worked out my whole life and just kind of doing like things at the gym, but when I got
a class here and there,
I was like,
just like,
and with with the kind of like, I should work out and like a boot camp class, and like just having no concept. And so like when I understood like muscle and then, and also the things that you do to grow muscle mass, i.e. prioritize protein, also help your blood sugar at the same time. And so it's like you're working in conjunction to like, to decrease your glucose response sorry, it's my dog, and to give yourself better equipment at the same time. And so it's just hugely impactful. And the more muscle I got, it was easier to decrease my body fat. Like, I'm not saying I was trying, but not like in the way that I would in the past of like depriving myself and trying to, fight against hunger. Like, oh, I can lose body fat and stay fed and satiated and not, it's like whole other world. It was a whole other world because my muscle was working for me.
Right, exactly. And all of the other things, sort of like you said, it's a process, but with sleep and sunlight and diet. And let's talk about the mental aspect of it too, right? Like mindfulness, right? Because if we're talking about being more deeply connected to ourselves, that requires some practice of mindfulness or going a little bit deeper or asking ourselves questions, right? Like, so what was that like for you?
I think I put a lot of like a lot of people probably do like, okay, well, mindfulness should be a thing. Maybe I should develop a meditation practice and add another like to-do thing in my life. Exactly. So a huge thing that I love to tell people is ways that you can develop this. That's not like, let me get up 20 minutes early so I can do my meditation. It's like, of course I want to do that, but midlife is hard and there's a lot on the table, it's like every day,
it is like minute to minute schedule. Yeah. Yes, it is hard. So it is not easy to add.
It's not easy to add. So how can we incorporate this in a way that's feasible? Okay. Lunch outside or dinner, any meal, literally any meal outside without a phone.
Yeah.
And you're connecting to the food that you're eating. Cause I am guilty of this too. Like lunchtime, don't mind if I do. It's time to scroll and shove food in my face.
I know. Totally. We all do it. And it's just so bad.
It's so bad. You're not connecting. You're not even like, it's just like food in here. And you're not even here. You're not here.
Right.
I say this as a person who does this. Like I'm guilty of this too.
Of course, we all do. We all do. But that's why I love your suggestion of one meal a day, actually sitting and eating outside if possible without your phone. Because when you are really connecting with the food that you're eating and you're tasting it and you're looking at it and you see it and you smell it, all of our senses are engaged and our cells are literally our body and our cells are preparing for that nutrition, for that fuel.
Exactly. And because like being outside and slowing down and actually connecting yourself, you're putting yourself in a rest and digest state. So you can there's like, you can actually, there's science about like when you take care of your nervous system in this way, you can actually absorb more nutrients when you slow down. Like think about it. Like if you're in this kind of like, your body's like, okay, let's just go. It's fine. And like, you're not, that's not science, but like, if you think about it, like when you slow down, your body can slow down too. And so it's not just like eating the nutrients. It's like, how do we absorb the nutrients? And so there are these ways, there's these like small ways that are not just another to do, that we just kind of make a little shift. And you do that and you start feeling how good that feels. It feels good. And so that ignites a little propel, like a push forward that's not reliant on willpower. That's not reliant on like, I have to do the thing. When you connect to how good it feels, it's not this force. It's not, you have to push yourself a little, but it's much more like gentle. It's much more sweet. It's much more like, this feels good. It's not like I have to do this. It's totally different.
It's hard to feel like you're in fight or flight when, if you are out in nature with a meal and about to sit and eat, right? It's like, it's hard to be very angry and mad when you're in a state of gratitude.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't be both.
You cancel out
right?
each other.
And both of those emotions and all of the things have their place and time, right? So that's why being out in nature or sitting and focusing on your meal, it's hard. You can't be in fight or flight because you're kind of focused and you're out in nature.
Exactly.
So you do shift to that rest and digest phase, which is just your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems switching on and off. And the problem is we're not switching.
Yeah, we're not switching.
We're constantly in fight or flight.
Exactly. And so I heard this thing and I just wanted to like tell this one little story because I was like, oh my God, it's so simple. So I heard bird song, like hearing birds chirp is actually really good for your nervous system. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then just kind of like had that in the back of my head. And then my friend and I were like, took a trip out in the woods and she's like, yeah, I walked out there and it was silent. But once I sat down, I could feel like all the animals were like, okay, she's cool. And then I started hearing the birds chirping. And I was like, oh, because bird song is like birds chirp and sing their songs when it's safe. They're not like la, 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 la when it's not safe around. So bird song, it's not bird song is good for our nervous system, is that it tells our body that like the birds feel safe, we're safe. Like we're safe. We're safe. And it was just like, I don't know, it's this simple thing that like gave me chills around like, we need to find these ways of just telling our bodies that we're safe and like to get us out of this because it's, I think for me and many of us, I've been trapped in the fight or flight and there needs to be intention and conscious awareness around getting out of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, Rachel, I want to thank you so much for being here on Suburban Warrior today. I really loved our conversation. And guys, we will link Rachel's information in the show notes so you can find her. And don't forget, you can find me at suburbanwarriorpodcast.com, at Suburban Warrior on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And don't forget to click that follow button so you don't miss any future episodes of the Suburban Warrior podcast. I'll be back next week with another amazing Suburban Warrior here to share her story with you. Till then, see you next week.